Welcome everyone. We are delighted to have you and thank you for joining us for another episode of Lifetime Asset Management's Lifetime Learning Series. I'm Lorraine Johnson. I'm one of the wealth consultants here at Lifetime. And we have with us Aline Dawson, whom I have known for, was trying to think yesterday, Aline, I think it's like 15 years. So we're really glad to have her here with her expertise to talk about housing options as we age, which of course has become a topic that is more and more important these days. Just so you know, you can email questions to us and we will answer those at the end of the session. And that is info@lifetimeasset.com. Asset is singular. info@lifetimeasset.com. And we will be taking a look at those at the end of the session. Just our speaker today is Aline, whom I've said and known for many years, but I had to count up. And Aline relocated from the San Francisco Bay Area to the Triangle in 2005. She retired from Cisco Systems in 2017. And during her career, she held a variety of IT management positions at companies, including, of course, Cisco, IBM, Apple, and Xerox. She holds a BA in Business Administration from the University of North Texas. Upon retirement, Aline became involved in the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, or it's known commonly as OLLI, at Duke program. And since the fall of 2018, she has taught a class there that's an overview of aging in place and aging in community. So that includes a deep dive, particularly of continuing care retirement communities, and they actually visit several of those around the Triangle. So really, without a whole lot of further ado, Aline, you can take it away. I will say to the audience that I will occasionally interject something or ask a question, but for the most part, we'll be holding that to the end.
All right, thank you, Lorraine. I'm happy to be here today. Today's presentation, as Lorraine was mentioning, is a summary of about 12 hours of information that my co-instructor and I share during our Stay Put or Move On class at OLLI at Duke. In addition to the 12 hours of information we share, we also spend 24 hours or 8 different visits to CCRCs around the Triangle area after 4 weeks of class preparation. So today we're going to talk about housing options. And this is the spectrum or the landscape of senior housing. We all are familiar with the single-family residence. Single-family residences can consist of things like our single-family homes. It can be an apartment. There are in the Triangle a lot of 55 and older apartments being built. There are co-housing communities within especially within the Triangle and across the country. Co-housing communities often, there are a few that are for 55 and older residents, but many of them are multi-generational so that you have different age groups living together and sharing common resources. And then of course, everyone's probably familiar with the 55 and older communities, which seem to be popping up all over the country and are very popular for seniors. As we move across the spectrum, we also have something called independent living communities. Independent living communities are typically apartments and they come with some services provided. For example, they often come with at least one meal a day. You may have transportation services that take you to the grocery store once a week, and they'll often have an activities director that helps to plan common activities for the residents in the community. As we progress up the spectrum, we have assisted living communities. And these are communities for individuals who need some services, some help with the activities of daily living. And activities of daily living are things like feeding yourself, dressing yourself, going to the bathroom, and getting in and out of chairs, for example, so moving around, ambulating. Also, in some cases, depending upon if you have dementia, there are also separate memory care communities Some assisted living communities might have a memory care wing. It might be a separate community. And of course, these are for people with memory issues. And then lastly, the highest level of care on this landscape or on this spectrum is skilled nursing. And skilled nursing can be used for two different purposes. One, on a short-term rehabilitation basis. Let's say you fell and broke your hip, and after you leave the hospital, you need some skilled nursing services for a couple of weeks before you're released to live independently again. And of course, then there are those of us who sometimes at the end of our lives need 24/7 nursing assistance, and that would be provided from a skilled nursing community. The cloud surrounding 4 of these communities is the continuing care retirement community. And in North Carolina, a continuing care retirement community has to provide all of these services to be called a CCRC. And they are providing all of these services in the same campus. So, but what Lorraine told me is that you want to talk also about aging in place. Well, aging in place is what everyone says is their ideal scenario. However, aging in place, like aging, isn't for the faint of heart. It's not just about remodeling your home or moving to a home with a first floor master. That can be important, but there's more to aging in place than just a remodeling project. Social interactions become more difficult to achieve as we grow frailer. And these changes happen gradually, sometimes without us even thinking about them. Maybe you can no longer see to drive at night, so you skip dinner with friends. Soon you find yourself more and more isolated for a variety of health reasons. Illness or dementia can also cause us to forget things like taking our medications, which can lead to unexpected complications. But what if we considered a new definition of home? Because that's when we talk about aging in place, we're talking about aging in our home. Isn't home where our friends are, our familiar furnishings, our pets, our plants? By changing our definition of home, we can age in place for a very long time without putting a burden on our family or our friends. This paradigm shift requires us to be open to redefining home as our needs change. Home can change as our needs change, from a single family residence to independent living to even assisted living and skilled nursing. If you're surrounded by your friends and your favorite objects, these can still be your home. Some experts recommend assessing your existing and future health at 5-year intervals beginning at age 60. So if you feel you'll still be healthy for the next 5 years, you continue living in your current environment and put on your calendar to reassess your health in 5 years. And this is a good idea as we reach the age of 60, and it gives us an opportunity to be proactive in planning our future as opposed to having it happen to us. Another thing that's key to aging well is community. And mostly experts tell us that the challenges of aging are best served by community. You can create a community. Some people rely on family members, some people rely on their neighbors, others plan to hire out care, and a lot of people rely on some combination of all three. But historically, family members provided assistance with aging family members. But today's mobile, busy society makes that more difficult. And not everyone wants family members to provide care. Even devoted family members can be overwhelmed and worn down physically, emotionally, and financially by the demands of caring for an aging parent. Studies show adult children devote an average of 77 hours per month to this activity, or about 2 weeks of full-time work. On average, they spend 35% of their budget on parental care. And the cost of in-home care, when intensive, and by that we mean 12 to 24 hours, of skilled care for things like an IV, a ventilator, changing sterile dressings, etc., can actually be more expensive than living in an assisted living center or a CCRC. And managing a variety of home care aides can be daunting. You can hire a healthcare manager to help with these tasks. However, things like hiring them, checking out, you need to do background checks on aides, and if things go awry, you may need to fire them. And that's a difficult thing to do when they're helping you personally. So often a healthcare manager can come in and help you with that. Sometimes people want to hire a friend or someone from their church to assist them. But before doing this, you should check with your long-term care insurance. Often, long-term care insurance will only pay for aides hired through an agency. So you already know what it's like to live in a single-family home. So from here on out, I'm going to focus on two types of housing alternatives that most people check out and are interested in. Independent Living Retirement Communities, or ILRCs, everything has an acronym, and CCRCs, the Continuing Care Retirement Communities. I'm going to explain to you how they are alike and how they're different. So this is the slide to show you how they're alike. In both cases, if you're moving from your current independent single-family home, and if you move into an ILRC or a CCRC, you must be able to live independently to move in. And in fact, a CCRC may require that your doctor certify that you're capable of living 3 years for the next 3 years independently. Another thing that is similar between the two is that the monthly fees increase 3 to 5% per year. This is a pretty shocking data point for a lot of people, but it is true. This is what happens. And that's because the cost of living goes up, the cost of expenses for hiring staff, etc. And so those costs are passed on to residents. And both types of community are going to provide you the following services: food, interior and exterior maintenance, community landscaping, utilities, social activities, and local transportation.
Aline, I know when we, for my mom, who, for anybody, most people don't know, my mom's 93, she's something else, and she lives in Maryland. When we were looking at independent living for her, we were looking at independent living retirement communities, and it was really important for us to itemize just about everything we could think of that she spent, and then really compare it to what was and wasn't covered, because some of the things they weren't necessarily on the list of what's provided, and we just needed to ask, because a few things were, even though they weren't on the list, and some other things that we had assumed would be covered were not. So in doing the budget for her, we needed to sit down and be pretty comprehensive, right down to whether she was or was not going to still need to pay property tax on her car.
Oh, right. Yeah. And one of the things that may have changed slightly, Lorraine, since your mother found her community, is in the early on, a lot of communities didn't provide Wi-Fi or internet. And today, it's more common for communities to provide Wi-Fi and internet. So you don't even, unless you want to, you don't even really need your landline phone. Mm-hmm. And as you probably found also, for example, you no longer, with one exception, you no longer typically pay property taxes, but you do still need to carry renter's insurance for the contents of your home. But when you actually look at, and as you talk about, as you did for your mom, when you itemize all of the things that you're no longer paying for, the slides I'm going to show you next with the cost of these communities aren't quite so shocking, but they're still can be eye-opening.
Okay.
So now let's talk about the differences between the two communities. Monthly fees. Although it may seem counterintuitive, an ILRC is typically, the monthly fees are higher than a CCRC. And the reason for that is because the buy-in for an ILRC is much lower than for a CCRC. So your buy-in with a CCRC is offsetting, or does help to offset some of the monthly fees. Now, an ILRC, as I said earlier, is typically an apartment, and the CCRCs are going to offer everything from an apartment all the way up to in one community here in the Triangle, they have about 3,000 square foot single family homes with 2-car garages. So the fact that the CCRC's residences can be so much bigger drives some of the price that I'm showing you here as being high. And in addition, the last slide I'm going to cover talks about the contract types, and the contract type is going to drive the price for a CCRC also. That does not come into play with an ILRC. So the ILRC, what you're seeing here is simply the cost of the square footage that you're occupying. An ILRC is like an apartment, and so your buy-in is typically 1 month's rent or maybe 2 months rent, whereas as CCRC, the buy-in is more comparable to buying a house, and it could be as low as $60,000. There are 1-bedroom apartments available here in the Triangle in a CCRC with a deposit or a buy-in of $60,000, and they can go as high as $950,000 and up.
Wow.
The other things that are different about the two is the ease of changing your mind, because the buy-in for an ILRC is fairly low. It's easy to change your mind. It's like living in an apartment. If you move into this community and you find out you really don't fit there, these are not your people, then it's not so hard to give notice, typically 60 days notice, and you can move. A CCRC, though, because your buy-in is so much more expensive, changing your mind is more difficult. Also, there are multiple ways you can the community can depreciate your buy-in. Most typical is your buy-in amortizes over a 50-month period. So 2% of your buy-in is amortized every month. And so if you change your mind fairly soon after moving in, you will get the bulk of your buy-in back, but it can be very expensive to change your mind once you've moved into a CCRC. Another difference is that the wait lists for ILRCs are short. They will often have an available apartment for you, or the wait might only be 1 to 2 months. And in a CCRC, the wait is very long. In the Triangle, especially if you want a single family home in a CCRC, the wait is on average 8 to 12 years. If you are comfortable and able to live in a 1-bedroom apartment, for example, you might only wait 2 to 4 years. So what this tells you is that if you think this is something you want to pursue, you need to investigate and get on the waiting list of a CCRC long before you think you're going to move into one. In fact, my husband and I are currently on the waiting list for 3 CCRCs here in the Triangle. And the reason we're on 3 waiting lists is because you don't know when you're going to have a future health event, and you might need to move in more quickly than you anticipated. So if that were to happen, you want to have the opportunity to choose from more than one community.
Aline, so what are the, I'm assuming there's a deposit or something that you have to put down to hold a place. If you want to get on a list, you have to pay?
Yes. So typically when you put your name on a waiting list at a CCRC, you pay an application fee, which in the Triangle ranges from about $250 to $300. And then you put somewhere between $1,000 and $3,000 deposit. And that basically puts your name on the list and gives you your place in the queue. Now, if you should, remember I have my name at 3 communities. Once I choose and go forward with one community, The other two communities will then refund the $1,000 or $3,000 that I paid to get on the waiting list. So that money is fully refundable. The application fee, however, is not refundable.
Okay. And I'll jump in just a sec. I realize we have some people here from, could be, again, from different states.
Right.
And I know for my mother in Maryland, some of the places, if you decided when they contacted you and they said, hey, we have a place, if you said, you know, we're just not really ready, you had to get back, they would literally put you back at the beginning of the line, or they would say you forfeited the deposit. And others said, no, if you can say you're not ready as many times as you want to, we'll still refund it if you change your mind completely, and we don't put you back further on the list. So that's another question to ask.
Right, and in the triangle, I've not found any community that we've visited who said, if you don't accept us, you lose your deposit. You know, the first offer, you lose your deposit and you go to the bottom of the list. I don't know of any that way, but there is one in it. I can't remember which one it is, but there is one here in the triangle that says 3 strikes and you're out. So you have 3 opportunities to accept the apartment, the residence that they offer you. And if you don't accept after 3 times, then you do go to the bottom of the list. You can also, you could say, they might offer you a residence and you might say, I know I told you I was ready. And by the way, they won't offer you a residence until you say you're ready. So most communities maintain 2 different lists. One is the wait list, and those are people that they don't ever call you. They might send you a newsletter every so often, but they don't bother you. And then there's the ready list. And the ready list, those are people who said, as soon as you have a place for me, I want to move to your community. And so you can say, I'm on the top of I'm at the top of the ready list, and you've offered me this community, but you know, I realize I'm not really ready. Put me back on the wait list. And you go back to the wait list at the top of the queue, because you basically are assigned a number. It's like when you go to a bakery and you choose that number. You know, if you are number 12, and then when number 11 has been served, you're next. No matter what happens to numbers 1 through 11, you're next. So that's basically the way it does work.
Okay.
Another difference between an ILRC and a CCRC is when you need a higher level of care, and a higher level of care is the assisted living, memory care, or skilled nursing. In an ILRC, traditionally, these communities do not offer those types of care. And so you must move to a new community. Now, in some cases, most of them will allow you to hire someone to come into your home and provide that care, although they often will want to vet those people, and you may have to hire them from a service that they provide. But at some point, especially if you need skilled nursing, and even if your assisted living requirements grow large, they are going to ask you to move to another community. In a CCRC, because they're offering a continuum of care and they offer all of those higher levels of services, you will also be able in your single family home to be able to hire that help in, and the same things apply. They will always say, we have to vet the person that's taking care of you, or they may have you hire them from their resources. And they will work with you to let you stay in your independent living or single family home as long as they can. But at some point, when they determine that you are a danger, you are in danger yourself, or you're not being adequately cared for, they will also ask you to move to a higher level of care within the same community, though. So you're still, this is my point about the paradigm, you're still in a community with your friends. You still have your pets with you, your plants, your furniture. So you do have to move, but not quite so dramatically. And then a couple of other things. The business model for an ILRC is typically a for-profit. corporation that is providing the financial oversight, whereas in North Carolina, CCRCs are typically not-for-profit. They were often, many of them are affiliated with churches, although not all, but they were often started by a church community, and so they grew up being a not-for-profit organization. And in North Carolina, the State Department of Insurance regulates the financial stability for CCRCs. And so those regulations can be quite stringent, and they're there to protect the residents of the community. So let's talk about CCRCs and let you understand some basics. In most cases, I mentioned earlier, you have to be healthy to enter. And healthy to a CCRC means you must be able to live independently without outside assistance. Now, if there's a couple, sometimes if some CCRC communities will allow one person in the couple to assist the other. Some communities will have more stringent rules, and they might say both people in the couple have to be able to live independently. And it's not that you are allowed to simply raise your hand and say, I swear I can live independently. You have to actually have a physician certify that you are able to live independently, and as I said earlier, sometimes for the next 3 years. There's also a financial test that the communities will impose before they'll accept you. And the purpose of this test is to ensure that your money will last until your projected death. And a general rule of thumb is that your assets must be 3 times the entrance fee, and your monthly income must be 2 times the monthly fee. And so the assets can be made up of your home that maybe you're selling to buy into the community. It can be your mutual funds, your IRA, any kind of asset that Lorraine might be managing for you. Your monthly income can be monthly income from Social Security, from annuities, from pensions, or from your investments. Long-term care is not required to enter a CCRC, but it does help with the financial test. And exactly how they apply long-term care insurance, I don't know, and I don't know that they all have Monte Carlo simulations and software that helps them. When you apply to put your name on the wait list, they will run scenarios for you to let you know if you should even apply. If they think based upon your current financial situation, you have an option for living in that community. And that's important. My co-instructor at OLLI at Duke had a friend who applied and got on the wait list for a CCRC and was on the wait list for 10 years, and then decided she was ready to move into the community. And by the time she was ready to move into the community, that her financial situation had changed, and she was told by the community she could not move in. And that was pretty devastating because she had spent 10 years planning to join this community, and then at the last moment found out she couldn't. Another basic about CCRCs, you're going to sign a life contract upon entry. And the life contract from the CCRC's perspective guarantees you access to that continuum of care. It will often include an assurance, but not a guarantee, that they will continue to let you live there, and even if you run out of money. And the assurance, they can make this assurance because most communities have a benevolent fund. Some of them actually ask residents, when you move into the community, you make a deposit into the benevolent fund to help fund it. Some of them have fundraisers, their gift shops that are in the community might help fund the benevolent fund. One of the things, it's important, this life contract, it's important that you ask your lawyer to review the life contract because you want to fully understand the expectations that the community has of you, as well as what you expect of the community. And one thing to keep in mind is that a CCRC's primary goal is to keep you safe. And keeping people safe during the pandemic has meant limited contact with the outside world. And I have a friend who is living in one of these communities, and this social isolation has been devastating for her. And yet, from the CCRC's perspective, they are living up to the terms of that life contract. They are keeping her safe. And my friend freely admits, yes, I signed this contract, and it was spelled out to me in the contract what I could and could not do. So it's really important that you understand that before you go forward with this, with such a decision. All right, so my next slide is rather dense, and I apologize for that. So before I go there, I apologize. But I want to cover with you what are the contract types for CCRCs. And although there are 4 columns on this slide, there are actually 3 different contract types, but the equity component sort of washes across all 3 columns. So let me start with column A, type A. They're referred to as both type A and fee-for-service, type B, modified plan, type C, extensive or life care. Type A, fee-for-service, means kind of just what it says. You're going to pay a set fee for every service you receive. And as your services increase and are more, they're sharing with you and providing you more expensive services, your fees are going to go up. So when you move into your single family home and you're living independently, you're going to have a fairly low monthly fee. But as your health deteriorates and you move into assisted living, your monthly cost will go up. And so as a result of this, this particular contract type tends to be the least expensive on a monthly basis, and it has the lowest buy-in. However, when you need those higher levels of care, you're going to pay market rate for those higher levels of care. So this tends to be a good contract type for people who have long-term care insurance, because as you need those higher levels of care, you can then file a claim with your long-term care insurance and hopefully be reimbursed for that care. Also, because you're not prepaying for any of that that higher level of care, some communities will allow you to bypass independent living and move directly into assisted living. This is an exception, not the rule. And if you're thinking about a CCRC, you would never want to try to play a game and say, oh, I'm not going to move there until I need assisted living, because they might not have space for you. They will only do this if they have space. The type B, or modified plan, once again, is sort of like it says, it's a modification between fee-for-service and extensive. So you are prepaying for a portion of your future long-term care services. So you would pay and accrue a certain number of days for higher levels of care when you need those higher levels of care at no additional cost. So for example, there's a community here in the Triangle in Chapel Hill called Carroll Woods. They're a type B modified plan community. And every year, residents earn 15 days in assisted living. And they can accumulate that 15 days for every year they live in independent living. So if you live in independent living for 10 years, you now have 150 in your bucket. You've accumulated 150 days of assisted living payments. And then the additional payment, the additional amount that you would pay for a higher level of care is discounted. So you're not paying the market rate, you're paying a discounted rate because you've prepaid to offset that. So generally the buy-in to a type B community is higher than a type A, and the monthly fees are definitely higher than a type A. It's still a good option though for people with long-term care insurance, because once you are not prepaying 100% of your higher level of care. So when you need the higher level of care, you'll be able to file a claim, hopefully, with your long-term care insurance, and they'll offset some of those additional costs. And lastly, the Type C extensive, as you might have guessed, is you're prepaying for all your future services, all your higher levels of care. So once you move into this community, let's say your monthly fee is $6,000 a month, you will never pay more than $6,000 a month, plus the 5% the rate's going to go up every year. But you will never pay more than that $6,000 a month, no, even if you live in skilled nursing. The market rate for skilled nursing might be $12,000 a month. You're going to pay $6,000. And the reason for that is you're paying a higher rate while you're living in independent living, and you're prepaying for those higher levels of care. So the financial model for a Type C community requires that a resident live for several years independently. So remember that I said that most of these will have your doctor certify that you can live independently for 3 years. A Type C may ask that your doctor certify that you can live independently for 5 years, for example. But their financial model probably assumes that you can live independently for 10 to 15 years. As a result, and the other thing about them is that their criteria for accepting you tends to be stricter than for a fee-for-service. Because if you are someone who, for example, has a diagnosis of Parkinson's or Parkinson's in your family, let's say, they might anticipate that you might need services for a longer period of time than someone without that diagnosis. And I believe there are some communities here in the Triangle that if you have a diagnosis of Parkinson's, they will not accept you. This is still, you can still move to a Type C. It still makes financial sense to move to a Type C community and have long-term care insurance. Because when you do move to the higher level and need the higher levels of care, you can still file a claim against your long-term care insurance and get reimbursed. So your cost of living might actually go down as you need those higher levels of care. And the equity column in this slide represents the type of ownership you have for the residence that you live in. And so for most communities, you don't own the real estate. So you don't hold title to it. You have the right to live there, but you don't hold title and you don't pay real estate taxes. However, if you live in an equity CCRC, you might hold title to it, and you may be responsible for paying your property taxes. And then, so there are those types, or at least two of those types of communities here in the Triangle that I'm aware of. And then there's a third type that's sort of a hybrid. You don't own title to the property, but they do consider that you own it. And when you move to a higher level of care, you have to resell your property through them before you stop paying the monthly fee for your independent housing.
It's sort of like getting stuck with two mortgages?
Yes, exactly.
While you wait until you can, wow.
That's correct. That's what can happen. All right, so I've done a lot of talking. I've thrown a lot of stuff at you, I know. So my next slide asks you, what about questions? So Lorraine.
Well, let's see if we have had any come in. And if not,
I did such a great job. No one has any questions, eh?
No, of course not. Of course not. Not a one. Okay, so the question was, is an ILRC or a CCRC deeded? So you are, does it have a deed?
As I mentioned, the CCRC, if you are in an equity community, and remember there's multiple types of equity communities, so you could have a deed, but that is really more the exception than the rule. Okay.
You know, you and I talked just a little bit. I was wondering, so what, we have people who are interested in basically what other resources are there because this has been a great presentation, but in terms of follow-up, where can they get more information about all of this and maybe absorb it or get more specific information about places in the triangle? Or?
Well, so one place, of course, I would tell you is our Stay Put or Move On class at OLLI at Duke. Now, we're not teaching that class this semester, and we won't be teaching it in the winter semester due to COVID-19 restrictions. But we do cover a lot of, and share with you a lot of research around aging. How do you stay healthy in aging? We do a deep dive into what are co-housing communities, that kind of thing in that class. And it's a very popular class. So typically we have a wait list. And it's
10 years or?
I'm sorry?
10 years or 8 to 10 years?
Right. Actually, we limit the class to 24 people, mostly because when we go visit the CCRCs, the visit includes hearing from the community, visiting in homes at the community, visiting with residents and having lunch with those residents so that you can ask informal questions of the residents. So we do restrict it to 24 people, unfortunately. Other sources, though, and there's a lot of, in our class, we present data from research that's happened on, especially around aging. But for CCRCs, finding information on the CCRCs, the best way might be to go to the state of North Carolina if you're in North Carolina, the Department of Insurance for the state of North Carolina. They have a very robust site where they have a description of every single CCRC in the state. It tells you what contract type they are. It tells you how many residences they have, a lot of stuff. And if you're interested in aging in place, AARP has some resources, and one website our newsletter that I particularly like is published by an NPR affiliate in Minneapolis, and that newsletter is called Next Avenue, and I think their website is nextavenue.org. In fact, their newsletter from this week had an article about why aging in place is harder than you think it is.
Aging is harder than you think it is.
Yeah, this is true too.
So another question that came in, what portion of the buy-in and monthly fees qualify for tax deduction?
Okay, this is a difficult question.
Everybody does that when you ask them a tax question.
I know, taxes are hard, huh? It actually varies by contract type. And so even though a fee-for-service community, remember, you're not prepaying any health expenses. Higher levels of care, those are health expenses. And so you mostly cannot deduct your monthly fees until you're in a higher level of care. However, because of the way the community works and the benevolent funds they had, a part of your monthly fee is actually paying for the health services of other members of the community. So even a fee-for-service community may have some portion of your monthly fee that's tax deductible. Certainly a type C community, a life care, a large portion of your monthly fee is deductible because you're prepaying those fees. And also your move-in, your buy-in is also tax deductible. Each community is different, and they provide their residents at the beginning of the year a letter from their accountant that says, here's how much you can deduct this year.
Okay, yeah, and I know I have one client where when they were moving into an equity community, they were looking at all of that in terms of the tax deduction, and we were basically waiting for almost for the CCRC to tell us, and then they were going to have it reviewed. So you talked about the OLLI class. I'll throw in one thing is just as a point of information. You were talking about independent living versus assisted living, and it was important for us with Mom to ask. She was going into an independent living apartment, and they also have assisted living. It's not continuing care all the way to nursing home, but she has independent living and assisted living. So it was important for us to ask at the beginning, if she starts to need care, can we hire someone from outside to come in, or do you make her move to assisted living? And the answer to that was basically, like you kept saying about it's the CCRC's job to keep residents safe first and foremost. And their answer was basically, as long as we feel like she is safe, she can have care in her apartment just like she would at home. So for anyone thinking, well, I'll have care at home, well, you know, independent living becomes your home. But they said if she gets to where she needs 24-hour care, even if it's more custodial and not, you know, as in nursing, she gets to where she needs round-the-clock care, or actually more than 12 hours of care, then she would have to move to assisted living. So that's an important thing to think about. And then because we knew her long-term care policy, as you said, independent living is a good place for that. We knew that her long-term care policy would pay, but we didn't know if they would let her. We've had the question again. It looks like maybe the person, maybe it's possible they missed it. Can you say again about the ILRCs? Is an ILRC deeded?
Oh, it's an ILRC. An ILRC would never be deeded. No.
No, because it's rental.
Because it's a rental. Yeah. The only time you might get a deed at all is in a CCRC.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, the independent living, for mom at least I know, is like, you know, it's renting an apartment. Let's see.
With some extra services, right?
With some extra services. Oh, sure. You know, she's got the van that can take her shopping, and, you know, they've got dinner. And again, another thing is some places provide 3 meals a day along with your rent. Some places it's 2. And so that's
CCRCs too. CCRCs will have a list of services. Some will maybe provide you $500 credit towards meals every month, and you use it or lose it. Some of them say you get 1 meal a day. That can be breakfast, that can be lunch, that can be dinner. You can always buy more. Some of them, especially if people travel, you know, they have to use their meal plan within a 90-day period of time. So a lot of communities will offer a meat for your freezer. You can buy wine from them and add to your wine collection and pay for it with your meal credit. So they're very flexible in that respect.
Okay. I have plenty more questions, but I also know that we are at 10 minutes till. So is there anything else, kind of parting words of wisdom? If the answer is no, that's okay.
Well, the parting words of wisdom I would give is to reiterate that if you think this is something you're interested in, explore it now and get your name on a list.
Okay. All right. Well, we have more webinars coming your way, and thank you, Aline, for taking your time and being generous. I know this is volunteer, and you already volunteer a lot of time in this regard to help the community. So thank you very much. And we do have more webinars coming your way as part of the new Lifetime Learning series. We have, so the current schedule is we have the first and third Thursday of the month. And so mark your calendars for first and third Thursdays. And we're covering a variety of topics. We're brainstorming at the office as advisors, saying, well, what do we think clients would be interested in from a variety of ages and different subjects. So just keep an eye out for those, and because they'll probably come up periodically that are of interest to you. The next webinar topic is one that we get asked about all the time, which is Medicare and Medicare enrollment. So while that may not sound like the most exciting thing, it is complicated and it's really, really important. So open enrollment, so that's on October 15th. And so check our website and register. Like I said, we will have these available on our website in terms of the recording from today. And we'll hopefully have that up within a couple of weeks. And really just keep an eye out, and we appreciate your time. We appreciate you taking time to be here with us. And thanks, and have a good rest of your day.
That was great, Lorraine. One thing that I will add for everyone is we
Yay.
are actually going to have a special event next week. Be on the lookout for some emails if you haven't gotten them already. We're having a special presentation on the effect of the election on the markets. So we think that's going to be a good one. We've got some good speakers lined up for that. So stay tuned for that one. That should be a very good one coming up. But stay tuned.
Okay, thank you.